The champagne glass in my hand felt heavy as I stood surveying the annual Walsh family gathering in suburban Connecticut, the air thick with faux pleasantries and latent judgment. I'm Serena Walsh, 32 years old and a director at a niche venture capital firm based out of Palo Alto, a fact my family struggles to categorize, let alone accept. My life in Silicon Valley, moving billions of dollars into green tech, remains an abstract threat to them, far removed from their predictable world of old money trusts. The ballroom itself, opulent and gilded with inherited wealth, felt more like a cage of their expectations. Every conversation was a thinly veiled transaction, every smile a calculation designed to assert social dominance. This evening, they were particularly focused on my career, which they deemed unstable and frivolous, and my personal life, which they repeatedly dismissed as imaginary. My mother, Deborah Walsh, approached me, her smile a brittle mask as she gestured toward my cousin Audra. "Serena, darling, you look rested." Audra was just telling us about her promotion to senior partner. "Such a smart girl, Audra. Meanwhile, we're still discussing your fictional man." The familiar sting of the made-up man mockery hit me hard. For years, I've kept my relationship with Elias Vance, the intensely private CEO of Vance Renewables, secret. They dismissed my vague descriptions of him as elaborate marketing chatter for my fund. "Honestly, Serena, it sounds like a pitch deck." Audra added, her tone dripping with superiority. I didn't flinch. I just smiled, raising the hand that held the champagne, deliberately concealing the splint on my pinky finger, a minor injury from an aggressive skiing trip that perfectly symbolized my current internal tension, a small, manageable pain hiding a larger strategic conflict. They were, in fact, digging their own grave. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Elias. "The documents are signed. The package is inbound." My smile tightened, no longer polite but predatory. They had no idea they were setting the stage for their own reality to crumble. I was here for the final confrontation, a deliberate and permanent extraction from their toxic orbit. The whole room felt silent to me, a prelude to the true storm about to break. You're following my story of vindication. Before we dive into what happened next, tell me, what time are you watching this and what city are you in right now? So I know how far my story has traveled. Hit subscribe and comment below to make sure you don't miss the moment they realize how monumentally they messed up. The roots of the Walsh family's profound contempt for me trace back to a single defining moment 8 years prior, when I rejected the deferred admission to Yale Law School in favor of Stanford's MS in Sustainable Systems. That choice to them was not merely a change in academic path, but a categorical, almost treasonous betrayal of the Walsh legacy built on predictable power structures and legal machinations. They saw it as a willful divergence, a foolish pursuit of fanciful green dreams that had no place in their world of solid, tangible influence. This profound resentment fueled their dismissal of my actual success in Silicon Valley. The problem was never truly Elias Vance, but my unrelenting decision to pursue independence and define success on my own terms. Elias, the CEO of Vance Renewables, and I chose to marry 2 years ago in a private ceremony precisely to establish a robust strategic legal shield necessitated by the highly sensitive multi-billion-dollar merger he was then navigating. This transaction required absolute secrecy, as any premature exposure would trigger regulatory scrutiny, and more dangerously provide an opening for ruthless corporate sabotage from competitors. My role was instrumental. I am a key financial partner and the majority shareholder in the very venture capital fund. They mocked a fund now valued conservatively at over $2.3 billion. This staggering wealth and influence was deliberately obscured. The secrecy became vital because my father, Arthur Walsh, a man whose ambition outweighed his ethics, was aggressively pursuing a lucrative multi-million-dollar federal contract. This contract was intricately linked to the financial stability of Elias's primary competitor. Arthur needed Elias to fail for his own deal to succeed. If my family had known the truth, that the man they called my made-up man was an industrial titan and I was his financial, legal, and strategic bulwark, they would have immediately attempted to exploit the relationship for Arthur's gain, compromising the merger and potentially ruining both Elias's career and mine. Elias's advice: let them think I'm a ghost, Serena. Ghosts can't testify became the chilling mantra of our guarded life. My public image as the frivolous failure was a calculated sacrifice designed to ensure they never scrutinized my actual finances or associations. I endured their petty, consistent humiliations for years, the constant undermining of my career, the derision regarding my relationship, and the relentless pressure to conform as a necessary evil. Tonight, however, the statute of limitations on their cruelty was finally expiring. The years of silent suffering and strategic endurance were culminating in this single, irreversible action. The true threat to Elias's merger and our future was ultimately the unchecked greed and ambition lurking within the Walsh family itself, a threat I was about to neutralize completely. My calculated sacrifice was finally delivering the ultimate payoff: unconditional, permanent freedom. The next phase required absolute composure. With the final confirmation vibrating in my palm, I moved back into the main hall, navigating the glittering, suffocating throng of the Walsh gathering. The air was charged with anticipation not for my arrival, but for the ceremonial crowning of my cousin Audra. My Aunt Vivian, the self-appointed matriarch of the family's balance sheet, intercepted me near the marble fountain, her expression severe. She pointedly ignored the splint on my pinky, treating it as an irrelevant distraction. Serena, those articles linking Walsh to your small-time green futures fund are troubling. Are you aware you're associating the family name with such speculative, illiquid ventures? It sounds terribly flimsy, frankly. She mispronounced the fund's name with dismissive precision, a deliberate, icy slight. I managed a neutral nod, feeling the internal pressure surge, the throbbing pain in my injured finger, a tiny, sharp reminder of the battle to come. Arthur Walsh. My father then joined the circle, placing a heavy, possessive hand on my shoulder, a gesture that always felt more like ownership than affection. Vivian is right, Serena. This whole Silicon Valley adventure is exactly why you need to stabilize. Look at Audra, she sets a standard. He gestured toward Audra Walsh, who was approaching with a preening smile. Senior partner at 34, making partner track money, real money. She's buying into a major strategic startup acquisition, a small green tech firm on the West Coast, just to diversify her portfolio and leverage her firm's capital. Audra sauntered into the conversation, radiating triumph. It's called EnviroCorp, Serena. You probably haven't heard of it. It's quite cutting-edge advanced intellectual property. We're finalizing the takeover next week, securing a massive market advantage. The raw, breathtaking irony of her statement hit me, nearly causing me to drop my glass. EnviroCorp was not just some small startup. It was the final, critically important intellectual property, a cornerstone patent that Elias needed to finalize his multi-billion-dollar merger. Furthermore, my fund had been systematically tasked with executing a preemptive hostile acquisition of the very holding company Audra's firm was using to finalize their deal. Audra's confident smirk was unbearable, signifying her perceived victory over my own niche, fanciful firm. Arthur seized the opportunity for maximum public humiliation, leaning in with a voice that dropped just enough to sound confidential, but loud enough for Vivian to hear clearly. Serena, you need to understand your limitations. You have a good education, but no structure, no guidance. I've spoken to Audra about this. She needs a motivated, bright administrative assistant or perhaps a low-level consultant. It would give you real corporate experience, something concrete, to put on your resume and a sense of belonging in the established world. He had publicly and brutally demoted me, offering a secretarial role as a profound insult to my directorship and my Stanford degree. The throbbing in my splinted pinky finger intensified, reflecting the years of accumulated emotional wounds. I took a slow, measured sip of champagne, allowing the silence to stretch, composing my features into an expression of cool consideration. "That is certainly a generous offer, Father," I replied, my voice smooth and utterly controlled. "I truly appreciate the thought. However, I must regretfully decline. I find I only consult for firms with genuine large-scale growth potential and stable legal footing. I do hope Audra's company isn't suddenly acquired by a much larger entity before I get a chance to review their books. That would be an unfortunate loss of potential." The word acquired hung in the air, a subtle but potent poisonous warning. Their faces, Arthur's smug satisfaction, Audra's arrogance, Vivian's financial skepticism, all remained entirely oblivious to the lethal double meaning I had just delivered. The manufactured tension of the ballroom became physically suffocating after the conversation with my family. I executed a clean break, immediately seeking refuge in a quiet, unused side corridor reserved for staff. The cheerful sounds of polite, distant laughter and clinking glasses, a grotesque mockery of the gravity of the events unfolding. I needed absolute clarity and final confirmation. The constant low throb from the splinted pinky finger was a grounding beat, reminding me of the razor-sharp control I had to maintain. My phone was already in my hand, connecting instantly to the secure encrypted line, linked directly to Reese Chen, my close friend and the chief strategy officer of my venture capital fund. Reese's voice when he answered was low, professional, and clipped perfectly, cutting through the external noise. "Status report, Reese. Confirm all final systems are green, no last-minute hitches." "All systems are green, Serena. The preemptive hostile tender offer was successfully executed 3 hours ago, effectively blocking Audra's firm from completing their acquisition of Enviro Corp. We own the property outright now, securing Elias's critical IP. The transaction is fully closed." My heart gave a singular heavy beat against my ribs. The first major step was secured. Reese continued, his tone softening slightly, recognizing the magnitude of the next piece of news. "And yes, the final transfer of capital from your trust to the holding accounts controlling Arthur's and Vivian's major private limited partnerships is complete. The deed is done. They're technically insolvent effective the moment the legal documents are served. They just don't know it yet, pending receipt of the official cessation notice. $400 million. The sheer financial muscle required for this complex maneuver, the hostile acquisition coupled with the leveraged control of my family's debt, was astronomical. I repeated the figure out loud, needing to anchor the reality in the vast number. The total capital injection for this strategic maneuver, acquiring the IP and securing the controlling interests in their 2 largest private limited partnerships, came in at just under $400 million, Serena. Your personal capital mostly. It represents a strategic liquidation of their entire foundation. It sounded like a bargain for a lifetime of peace. Reese then reminded me of the final crucial step, the physical embodiment of the execution. Gavin Reed, the lead counsel for Vance Renewables, is en route now. He's carrying the package, the official notice of the EnviroCorp acquisition, and the documentation confirming the cessation of all shared financial and legal agreements with Arthur Walsh & Associates. He's the one who delivers the statement and the final blow. I took a deep, steadying breath, the decision years in the making, now mere minutes from fruition. My voice was utterly unwavering as I delivered the final critical instruction. Reese, ensure the documentation explicitly, undeniably states that I am the sole person authorizing this move. I am acting as the controlling interest of my firm, the entity that acquired the debt, not merely as Elias's wife. I want the cessation of accounts to be permanent, comprehensive, and immediate. No severance package, no residual golden parachute, no exceptions for sentimentality. Complete, irreversible severance. A profound, chilling calm settled over me. This was beyond revenge. It was the meticulous surgical execution of a years-long plan for complete financial and emotional liberation. I ended the call knowing the lawyer, the stranger poised to shatter their reality, was only moments from entering the room. I returned to the grand ballroom with deliberate slowness, projecting an aura of composed indifference, the weight of the coming storm settling around me. My timing was perfect. My father, Arthur Walsh, was already on the elevated stage, bathed in the harsh, focused glare of a spotlight that emphasized his silver hair and self-satisfied posture. He was beaming, ready to deliver the centerpiece of the evening, his congratulatory address to Audra, which, as predicted, quickly devolved into a thinly veiled, sanctimonious sermon about my perceived failures. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed into the microphone, echoing across the opulent hall. "Tonight we celebrate the true, unyielding spirit of the Walsh family: commitment to tradition, commitment to success, and commitment to the established order. We choose the predictable, the proven path, unlike some among us who chase after—" He paused dramatically, his eyes scanning the crowd, and finally resting on me with a heavy, undisguised look of paternal disappointment. "Fanciful green dreams and hypothetical relationships." The crowd responded with a polite knowing and deeply insulting ripple of laughter, exactly the response Arthur had engineered. He opened his mouth, prepared to continue his self-aggrandizing degradation. It was precisely in that critical, elevated moment of his perceived victory that the impossible happened. The heavy mahogany double doors at the far end of the ballroom, imposing and ancient, swung inward with a muffled but distinct thud. A tall, imposing figure stood silhouetted against the softer ambient light of the corridor outside Gavin Reed Elias's lead counsel, the stranger I had spoken of, embodying power and irrevocable change. He was dressed in a pristine, impeccably tailored dark suit, a uniform of absolute, unquestionable legal authority, and carried a sleek black leather satchel, the kind that did not contain congratulations or gifts, but final damning litigation. The effect was immediate and absolute. The music seemed to die mid-note, the high-pitched, petty conversations faded into a collective stunned and terrified silence, fulfilling the dramatic promise of the hook. Gavin did not rush. He moved with a measured, deliberate gait, his presence a palpable disruption to the room's carefully orchestrated elegance. His eyes swept over the shocked faces of the minor family members, ignoring them entirely. His path fixed directly toward the stage where Arthur stood frozen in the spotlight. Arthur, completely derailed by the intrusion, stammered into the microphone, his authority dissolving into sudden, panicked confusion. "Excuse me, sir, this is a private event. Who are you? You cannot interrupt." Gavin reached the edge of the stage, placing his satchel on the side table with a solid, echoing sound. He did not answer Arthur directly. Instead, he executed a slow, calculated turn, his cold, piercing gaze effortlessly locating mine across the vast width of the room. I met his eyes, allowing a single, almost imperceptible nod, the final, absolute confirmation. Then he turned back to Arthur, who was trembling slightly, his voice calm, clear, and perfectly amplified by the dead silence of the hall. It rang with the unmistakable authority of a decree. "I sincerely apologize for the unavoidable intrusion," Gavin announced, his voice carrying the gravitas of a judge. "But I am here to serve an immediate legal notice from the Board of Directors of Vance Renewables, specifically the notice of hostile acquisition and termination of your controlling interests in Walsh and Associates Consulting, effective immediately. And I am here by explicit order of the majority stakeholder of the acquiring entity." The dramatic pronouncement hung in the suddenly frigid air, the silence now fractured by a collective intake of breath from the assembled guests. The color drained from Arthur Walsh's face so rapidly and thoroughly that he resembled a statue carved from lifeless chalk, his body stumbling back against the podium for support. His mask of composure shattered instantly, replaced by sheer animal terror. "Acquisition Walsh and Associates is not for sale. This This is a profound, grotesque mistake. You have the wrong person. You have the wrong company. He bellowed the microphone, amplifying his desperate denial. Aunt Vivian, ever the opportunist prioritizing wealth over dignity, rushed forward from the crowd, her face twisted with a mixture of confusion and financial indignation, her voice shrill with panic. I manage those accounts. This is slander. Tell us who this supposed majority stakeholder is. We will sue you and your entire firm for defamation. Gavin Reed, the cool architect of their destruction, remained utterly composed. He retrieved a heavy bound sheaf of legal documents from his satchel. He didn't even grant Vivian the dignity of a glance. His focus remained laser-sharp on Arthur, and he spoke with the deliberate clarity of a man delivering a long-awaited final judgment. The majority shareholder, the individual who strategically authorized the $400 million preemptive capital injection that not only secured the critical IP, but also acquired the debt and controlling interest in your firms, is not a phantom madam. She is seated right here tonight. She executed this action through her private venture capital fund, which as of 2 weeks ago holds all outstanding notes, and secured debt instruments related to the stability of Walsh and Associates Consulting. He then executed his final devastating turn, moving his gaze to me and extending his hand in an overt, deliberate gesture of professional deference that shocked the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gavin announced, his voice booming with satisfaction, "allow me to introduce the new principal director and controlling majority interest of the now insolvent Walsh and Associates Consulting, Ms. Serena Walsh." The gasp that rippled through the hall was overwhelming, heavy with utter shock and disbelief, a sound of mass recognition of total disaster. Audra's mouth fell open in a silent scream, the slow-motion realization dawning that the EnviroCorp deal she had bragged about in Part 3 was not merely blocked, but had been used as bait, swallowed whole by the corporation controlled by my investment capital. Arthur, clinging desperately to the only name he believed possessed enough power to inflict this devastation, whispered, his voice cracking with futile hope. "Elias Vance. You're doing this for Elias. He sent you to hurt me." My moment had arrived. I walked slowly toward the stage, my head held high, the soft, deliberate thud of my heel steps on the marble floor, marking the gravity of the unfolding scene. I did not need to raise my voice. I simply stood beside Gavin, facing the paralyzed crowd, and most importantly, I looked directly into my father's broken, defeated eyes. "No, Father," I corrected him, my voice carrying cool conviction. "You don't need to call Elias, and you won't, because the person who engineered this acquisition, who strategically bought you out, and who has controlled your financial and professional fate for the past 2 hours, is not the made-up man you so cruelly mocked for years. It is his legal wife and the sole controlling interest of my own venture firm. I, Serena Walsh, am the one who has finally and definitively decided the value of the Walsh legacy." Mother Deborah, her face a horrific mask of panicked self-preservation that erased any trace of maternal affection, quickly abandoned her shocked clique and rushed toward the stage. She stumbled slightly, grabbing my arm with a desperate, clawing grip, her voice thick with fake sentimentality. "Serena, darling, what monstrous thing are you doing? Please, this is family. We are blood. Don't destroy everything over some petty business deal. We can talk about this in private. We can fix this, my dear. We can fix this, I promise." She attempted to pull me into a suffocating hug, a final manipulative display of false affection I had endured and rejected for decades. I pulled away instantly, decisively, shaking my head to detach her grip. The very moment she uttered the word family, the emotional ice I had maintained for years solidified in my veins, achieving the necessary finality. "Fix this." I repeated, my voice steady and utterly devoid of warmth, the composure shattering her last shred of hope. You called me a failure for years. You mocked my success in a burgeoning industry, you laughed at my relationship, and you publicly demoted me to a secretarial assistant just 1 hour ago. You and Father have spent my entire life trying to prune me back to keep me small and manageable, solely so I wouldn't eclipse your fragile inherited egos. This evening is not about a business deal, Mother. This is about the carefully calculated cumulative cost of your toxic, unrelenting control and the years of emotional abuse you inflicted. I turned sharply to Gavin, who stood patiently holding the weight of the legal papers. My gaze swept over my father Arthur, who now stood truly broken, the crushing weight of his financial and social ruin fully settling upon his shoulders. Gavin, proceed with the final directive immediately. I want all personal and joint bank accounts associated with Arthur and Deborah Walsh frozen permanently. Revoke access to all club memberships. The country club, the yacht club revoke their political advisory positions and terminate all corporate credit lines tied to the dissolved Walsh and Associates. And yes, that explicitly includes the lease on the luxury sedan Father gifted me last Christmas. It was never truly mine to keep, and it is certainly no longer his to give. The finality of the words was absolute, ringing like the death knell of their social standing. Arthur, completely cornered, lunged forward with a desperate physical energy. You cannot do this. I am your father. I will sue you. You need me. You still need my connections. Serena. I looked at him with an immense detached sense of closure, the years of pain finally receding. No, Father. I don't need you now. And I never did. And you certainly didn't need me. You only needed the illusion of my failure to inflate your own success. I gave you years, decades to apologize, to show respect, to simply believe in my capacity. You chose mockery, humiliation, and control at every turn. That choice has an irreversible financial and personal price, and tonight the bill is due and non-negotiable. I made the final profound declaration, looking straight into my mother's terrified, calculating eyes, achieving the ultimate act of severance. The Walsh family, the version you represented and controlled, ends here. Effective immediately, I consider our relationship severed legally, financially, and personally. There will be no reconciliation, no communication, and no second chances. The sharp, echoing sound of my heels clicking rhythmically on the polished marble floor as I walked away from the stage and out of that gilded, suffocating cage of a ballroom was without question the most satisfying, deeply resonant sound I had ever heard in my life. I did not afford myself the weakness of a single glance back at the horrified, paralyzed faces of Arthur, Deborah, Audra, and Vivian, their meticulously constructed world dissolving into immediate debt and total public shame behind me. Elias Vance was waiting near the imposing front entrance, standing silently against the massive archway. He wasn't loud or dramatic. He simply walked toward me, offering silent, unwavering support, took my non-splinted hand, the one that still functioned perfectly, and squeezed it gently, a powerful, unspoken acknowledgement of the comprehensive battle I had just won. We walked out of the venue together and into the crisp, liberating air of the Connecticut night, where Reese Chen was waiting discreetly with the car ready to drive us away from the ruins I had created. The sense of relief that washed over me was profound, a lightness, a fundamental absence of chronic tension I hadn't realized I was missing since childhood. Within the week, the shocking news of the hostile, unexpected acquisition by a secretive, newly prominent VC firm, my firm controlled by Serena Walsh, completely dominated both the financial headlines and the exclusive social circles of the Eastern establishment. The consequences for my family were exactly as severe and real as I had meticulously planned. Arthur Walsh was publicly disgraced, summarily removed from his role as a senior advisor, the devastating loss of Walsh and Associates' controlling contracts, resulting in immediate insolvency and the complete collapse of his political influence. Deborah and Vivian were swiftly, brutally, and publicly stripped of all social standing, their names synonymous with financial and social ruin permanently ousted from the coveted country club and their high-profile charitable organizations. Audra's promising career was derailed, her firm suffering a massive public relations hit, losing major clients and facing internal investigations due all to their failure to secure the crucial EnviroCorp deal that I had deliberately engineered and sabotaged. They were left with nothing but their pride, and that was the most bankrupt asset of all. Standing in my own silence, I felt no overwhelming surge of victorious adrenaline or cruel triumph. Instead, I felt an immense fundamental peace. The immense capital, the power, the meticulous legal maneuvering it, was all simply a tool, utilized to achieve a singular, essential, deeply personal goal, my absolute, hard-earned freedom. I realized that the greatest damage they had inflicted wasn't the mockery or the humiliation. It was successfully convincing me for so many years that I needed their validation to be successful, or that I could not thrive outside their suffocating structure. The years of enduring their scorn, the necessity of absolute secrecy, the physical pain of the broken pinky finger, it was all worth it for this moment of absolute unconditional independence. The true victory wasn't merely the $400 million I strategically invested and the wealth I secured. It was the profound, undeniable freedom I earned from their judgment and the absolute power I gained to define my own worth.